Peace and blessings. This is me, Sal Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, hitting you up with another episode of the Raw Talk. And today we're going to talk about therapeutic counseling, the most important part of reparations. And, you know, let's get started with this. Imagine, if you will, a person that has undergone rape. Who should receive the counseling? The rapist, the rape victim, or both people? You would probably say both people. And I think, in terms of reparations, um, that's one of the biggest things that need to be handled and discussed is this area of counseling, healing. You know, if you went through, a series of mental anguish, you need to be healed. We're living in a time period where, the taking of human life is nothing. And that's unfortunate. But no one wants to speak up on about that. Let me just say this. All of these movements, these present day movements, whether they be about critical race theory or uh, sexuality or Me Too or Black Lives Matters, they're all glamour movements. They're not about bringing something to the human stage and creating, something greater. The last movement that we had that did that was the civil rights movement to bring people, not only um, African American people, but many other people, to achieve some sort of equality, right? But it was carried on the backs of African American people. So now we're dealing with an era where the movements are completely narcissistic. And what happened to Narcissus? He he created a forum or got into his place where he could look at himself. I only want to see this kind of people. I don't want to see that kind of people. And as he began looking at himself in the lake, he died. What lesson does that teach? That's 1,000-year-old story. What lesson does it teach? You know what I'm saying? And then looking at the era that was going on, there's reasons why people die in the universal scheme of things, right? And there's a reason why um, a lot of people die today because they want to hold on to outdated ideas. I don't understand why people can't find a solution to racial injustice. Here's my thing, and it's very simple. Race was constructed by colonialists. It was a way to reinforce white supremacy. Now, there's some misinterpretations behind this. The first being is that people always identify themselves as white. People didn't identify themselves as such, but the term was used for a dignitary. So when you say as a person of color or a quote unquote person of color, oh God, or how they say it today, a black or brown person, hey, that white person over there, you're calling that person your superior. It wasn't as if they were identified as white and tied that term to them. I mean that's how the term became known. The term meant, like something of a superior nature, and they assigned that to themselves as Europeans. That's how it started. You can look it up in encyclopedias and dictionaries, look up the origin of race idea. You know what I'm saying? And the construct that was created gave birth to many of the forerunners of the Nazi Party, race. So if you're walking around trying to fight against race but submit to it, you're actually submitting to Eurocentric colonialist thinking. I would say colonialist thinking because all the Europeans were also subject to slavery, and some of them were sold off as black people. the Irish being the prime example, right? But why would you take this philosophy that was created by people who are using it to subjugate people and use it as a form of identity? That's like India, right? The English went over to India and a caste system was developed. Instead of those people over there just destroying the caste system, they embrace it and try to find a way to get to a higher level of a caste system that was created by their conquistadors. Why would you like do that? You know what I'm saying? I don't get it. Like I watch these shows that talk about these discussions and stuff, and all it is giving people a Rubik's cube while you go out and make money and conquer the world. They just give you a Rubik's cube so you can figure the stuff out. Reject the stuff. Reject the stuff. Because once that's rejected, then the playing field changes. But if you're going to identify yourself and try to find equality in a system that was clearly made for supremacy, and I'm not talking about a country or whatever, I'm talking about the philosophy, the ideology of race, of pigmentocracy, or whatever you want to call it, reject it because it's demonic. It's known in the scriptures as the mark of the beast. And you embrace it and try to find out some way to get happiness from something that was created to say that you're inferior, that you're an animal. I don't get it. It's stupid. Because what it does, it gets your focus on other people rather than your relationship with the creator as a people or as an individual. Because you're sitting there looking at what someone else is doing. Meanwhile, your backyard is dirty as hell. You know what I'm saying? So this is some things to think about. And because of that reason, people need counseling because they just need counseling. When you can have 40 cop killings in 1 year and the streets let out for 40 people who was killed just, like it's good that they came out. But then 3,000 people were killed in African American genocide, and not a word is said about that. Maybe possibly 200-300 children also got swallowed in that, and no one says a word. Life is life. Those mothers are crying, just like the people who got killed by the police. And then you want to stand up and act as if you're equal, and no one can come to your neighborhood. No one can come to your house. How could you be equal if no one can come to your house? I don't know. So these are some things to think about that just seem to transcend to different areas of life that, is just tearing the fabric of society down. You know, no one wants to have this conversation because everyone is into glamour. If you offend how they look, they feel just in putting you on a chopping block. But if what you're saying about how they look is actually something that can improve their condition, they won't understand it. They won't understand it. So until you get rid of this idea of racial classification, there's no strides that you can make in society because you're following the philosophy of your captors. That's all you're doing. And people don't get it. You say, oh, race is not, oh, that guy, he's a dreamer, or something like that sort of thing. Meanwhile, you're following this. I know the history of slavery and human injustice. There are 20 nations in the world that has experienced 400 and some odd years of slavery. And there's a reason why the number is 400. That's a whole other discussion. But you would think that if someone's really trying to get out of that condition, They will look to see what happened in those situations with those other nations that were enslaved for 400 years or more. No one does that. That's not brought into the conversation. Okay. The other thing is that there's no historical records of slavery existing in the hunting gathering period. People are always looking for the world's first civilization. What difference does it make? There were other forms of human societies that existed before civilization. The hunting gathering era proves that. Okay. What I came up with, because slavery is mentioned in the Bible in a positive way, whether it's the Old Testament or what people call the New Testament, where it says that you should obey your masters as if you do the Christ. You know, so much for that. But what I would say is, in my research, slavery, there's no historical record or any records, any pictograms of slavery existing in the hunting gathering era, right? In a clear sense, maybe it did exist. So I was trying to find out, man, what was the origin of this behavior? And then one day I meditated, I figured it out. It was like if you had a family and someone accidentally killed your family member, they didn't mean to do it intently. How could they, pay the family back? How could they get on? And they would serve the family. That's probably how it kind of got started in civilization. Anyway, 6,000 years later, during the 18th, 17th, and a tidbit of the 16th centuries, ideas came about abolishing a human behavior that lasted for 6,000 years. Suppose those people said, oh, that's not real. You want to get rid of slavery. That's not real. In the same way I'm saying, get rid of the racial classifications. You probably say that's not real. But what about those people who sought emancipation from slavery in a society at that time that there was no precedent of, you know, slavery ending, you know? So learn to think out the box, you know what I mean? And a lot of that has to do with healing because you can't recognize what's in front of you if you're still in pain. You know what I mean? If you there's so many things that are going on, so many different levels at this time, and the dialogue that's happening addresses none of this stuff. It addresses absolutely none of this stuff. And you can go on pretending to be part of some movie that you see that talks about the pain and the pressure of people and we're going to get to a certain place and we're happy now. You can believe those things, you know. But see what happens where you at in 20 years. Just like you believed those things 20 years ago, now look where you at. Where your children at. Who's dying in the streets. But because you want to believe in a movie and follow something that's unreal. To adopt the philosophy of your captivars. The colonials created race in the 16th century. These terms were being used, and they applied the terms white the meat because at that time that was like a nobleman in this definition. It wasn't about the complexion. They applied it to themselves in the lower terms like the black plague, black magic, blackmail. They applied to people who now identify as black people. They applied those terms to them to give them a negative connotation. And you would